it's live.
Okay.
And now it's using the back camera. Silly thing. There. Of course, it would be using the wrong camera, right?
Of course.
There we go. Now it's live.
Okay.
All right. So right about here. Here's your screen area for that.
Cool. Okay. Good to know.
Okay, well, I guess this is what we got for the meetup. First off, if you haven't tossed $5 in a hat, I would really appreciate it. It helps cover the cost of this room. I never make enough to buy anything more than a beer if I'm that lucky. So,
Is there change in the hat?
there is. There seems to be lots of change in the hat right now.
Perfect. Looking for that.
So, welcome to the WordPress Meetup. I'm John Overall. With me, this is Shawn DeWolfe. And the WordPress Meetup is generally monthly. We're just not going to be doing one in December. This is the last one for this year. We'll be back again in January, and you can check the meetup for all of them. We have them all scheduled out for the rest of the year, all the way until July. So we do have some really good presentations coming up. We have one, January's presentation's already decided. It's going to be me, and I can't remember the other fellow's name. You.
Yes.
Give me your name.
Jacob.
Jacob, thank you, Jacob. Jacob's going to be presenting with me. So, and if you know anyone who wants to present, let me know. I'm happy to shuffle off the stage and let someone come up here and present something that they know about WordPress to the group. So, John Overall, johnoverall.com, WordPress hosting, WordPress emergency support, the host of the wppluginsAtoZ podcast, and I will be presenting tonight on SEO 101. First off, we've got Shawn DeWolfe from DeWolfe Consulting. He's going to be presenting WordPress optimizations, how to get from a D to an A. So these two go hand in hand. What he's going to tell you, I'm going to use that information with the SEO to tie them together a little bit. So here you go, Will.
Right on.
Here you go, Shawn.
Thanks, man. Thanks, everyone. So, what I want to talk about tonight is optimization of WordPress, because out of the box, WordPress gets a little loose and it takes just a little bit of art to tidy it up. But it's not really hard, so you get some quick wins pretty fast. As John said, the question of who am I? Shawn DeWolfe. I've been working in WordPress since 2011, web design since 96, and computers since 84. So my link at the bottom where I've published more stuff about WordPress. Where I publish stuff about WordPress and Drupal. I kind of do stuff with WordPress and Drupal sometimes together, or sometimes getting people kind of out of being stuck in Drupal and over to WordPress. So that's kind of what I do. The big topic is what makes a site slow, and just some general things.
Step forward a little bit, Shawn.
Yeah,
That way people on there can see the screen. There you go.
Can everyone else see behind? Okay, there we go. Okay.
There you go.
So what makes a site slow is a bad server, so your ISP, they could be to blame. Bad connectivity, maybe the server, the hardware is good, but everything else is bad. Maybe the people you're connecting with as your principal audience are bad. I had an example of one site I worked with for the longest time where a lot of the people were in Africa. So some of them had like super high speed, crazy good bandwidth, and super bad bandwidth, and it was never in between average. It was just one of the two. So of course people aren't going to complain that the site loads fast. They're going to say their connectivity is a factor in why it's performing poorly. Bulky code, that sometimes happens. Bad code, where, as you were saying before we got talking, that sometimes plugins are just written poorly and they just end up performing really poorly. Big images, sometimes the plugin's the culprit for that. Sometimes it's just design decisions that needed a bit of a review. Third-party apps, and third-party apps is the one that's really hard to deal with because all those fancy, cool things out there on the web, like Facebook connectivity and Instagram feeds and Google fonts, and the long list of cool comes from third-party apps, and if they're bad at their game, your site suffers. And the other thing is too many files to fetch. WordPress is good about building a great big good look from an amalgam of a whole bunch of pieces. The problem is with that amalgam is it's a whole bunch of Lego in your bin, and you just don't want so many pieces. So why does any of this matter? Well, it's been a long-standing thing that the longer it takes for your site to load, the more disaffected people will be. So it's a magic number. It keeps being moved down, but you know, it's subjective, but your numbers will drop off the slower your site is. That's a guarantee. Big downloads can really disaffect people who are on mobile. who are trying to get a website. The website is 7 megs to download it, and maybe they have a monthly cap of 1 gig of bandwidth, and that cooks into something like 150 pages they can see in a month, or just a handful a day. And if your site is really bulky, you're going to cost them bandwidth, and if they frequently come to your site, they may rethink that. Slow to download means it's also hard to share. Like if you've ever done a Facebook share and you put in the URL in your post and you say go, the thing will churn and try to get off. Facebook will try to get to your website, get something intelligible to form the preview and bring it back, and it might not get to it before your user clicks and submits it, or Facebook just gives up. So your sharing is going to be kind of half-baked. Search engines, John's going to talk about at length. They equate quality of your site performance with quality of search results, and they will rank. And it's not like they're going to drop your site. Like Google's unlikely to drop a site from its indexing, but it's going to bury it in favor of sites that perform better. So it's sort of the thing about skyscrapering of you say that you have to be just a little bit better than your competition. So whoever your key website is in your niche that you're up against, you've got to outperform them. And the way to do that is optimizing your site. And I said, download speed, ranking factors. It's important just to make sure that your site's good for a whole bunch of reasons, but the tiebreaker in any of that is that Google's going to bury results, and most people get their traffic from search engines. So what I do when I assess the site is there's a number of tools out there. I'm sure John's going to go into a few of them in his talk. But the one I keep going back to is one called gtmetrics.com. And gtmetrics.com is really great because you type in the URL. They encourage you to sign up. They encourage you to have a membership. There's a pay level. There's a lot of stuff that's great about it. But you can just type in a URL and see what's it like. And in this case, I had one site of mine that I just don't care about that much, so I haven't really put much attention to it because cobbler's dilemma of the cobbler's shoes, right? So it's got a page speed of F at 35%, so it's lousy. It's E-slow, which is another ranking of how fast it is almost as bad as an E. It takes 4.5 seconds to load, even for just the front page, which isn't really that intensive of stuff. 6.5 megabytes of data is coming out, 6.65, and 117 file requests. And when your bandwidth is kind of thready, how a web server does its thing when it's communicating with the browser is it'll send up stuff in volleys of 2 or 4 pieces, depending on what browser you're using. And what it'll do is it'll say, okay, I got these 4 things to throw you. It'll throw it to the browser and then wait for those to complete and then throw another 4 and another 4. And it just keeps doing these doubles or quartets of files until it has enough files for you to see what's on the page. So that means if you have 117 of those coming through, you got to wait for it to go stop, bring in, and do that for the length of time it takes to load. Luckily, with high bandwidth, 4.4 seconds is how that plays out, but in some sites, low bandwidth, maybe the browser's a little bit under-resourced, it will be really slow. So it'll be really a frustrating experience. So yeah, that's the look of what it's like. It gives you a good overall view of what your site looks like in a snapshot. And the letter grade system is great. You can go from an A or an A+ all the way down to an F. What it does just below that main fold is it breaks it down into what are your problems. So there's a whole bunch of things it gives you that are actionable things you can do to make it better. And it's not just WordPress, this will do it for any website. So that's really great that you can say, whatever site you throw at it, what's its performance like? And we're gonna go through some of these here, but for example, some of the big sins is something called gzip compression, defer parsing of JavaScript, optimizing images, is the JavaScript in the page, are you using browser caching, minimizing redirects, more problems with CSS, ordering of styling of stuff. Some of this stuff is good, it's ideal. Some is not so good, and some doesn't matter either way. But some of the really big ones that kind of create a lot of bulk in your load, that's what it's there to fix. The other test it does is it talks about a waterfall. And a waterfall is really important. That whole thing about downloading 4 files and waiting, and the next one and waiting. What a waterfall shows off here is it shows off and it breaks down what's taking so long to get stuff to happen. And you see some of it starts here, and then it pauses, and then these things come in. So in other words, it's got to get the thing that asks for the page. And then it's got to do everything the page is commanding it to do. And then each of these pieces, if they're third party, you're at the mercy of how that third party is. And sometimes you look at the third party, we're only downloading 20 bytes or 60 bytes or some really tiny amount, so who cares? And it doesn't seem like it's the culprit. But then you look again, you go, well, it took 3 seconds to get that 30 bytes. So it's waiting until it has it. The other thing too with this is a lot of these pieces come in at the request of JavaScript. And JavaScript is good for doing a lot of processing. You're hard pressed nowadays to find a non-JavaScript driven website. But JavaScript pauses the rendering of your page until it knows what to do. So it goes, okay, what do I have on the page? It will assess it, which could take processing time. Then it brings in other resources, and that creates this long delay that could end up being noticeably long. So the usual things I try to fix in all these cases are image sizing, which is a combination of bulky images as well as images that are just too large, like say it's a 72 by 72 pixel, but you actually are asking for a 1400 wide picture. And it's just, you don't need something this big for an image that's going to present this small, so you right size it. JavaScript placement, which isn't, the trick of JavaScript is when it does HTML, it moves top to bottom on the page. So when it gets the JavaScript command, it stops, it goes, let's do the JavaScript stuff, and we'll pause everything. You can get past that by moving it to the bottom where it builds the page, starts to show it, and then says, hang on a sec, we've got more JavaScript to do after the fact, but you've got the bulk of the page, somebody can see it, and they may be able to use and act on stuff on the page. So carefully moving your JavaScript around is a big way to fix that up. JavaScript compression, again, there's 117 files it requests, a lot of them are JavaScript, and they don't need to be separated out as dozens of files. CSS styling, same sin there. You'll get a lot of CSS files when it doesn't need to have so many CSS files, when really it just practically needs one big CSS file. So the closer you get from dozens down to one, better your performance is going to be. Zipping is something outside of that where it's a server thing, where you can actually compress what's coming out from your server and gets read in by your browser. And just once you automatically set it up, it just keeps doing that all the time. And almost every browser, I think the last time I found something where gzip was an issue was like 10 years ago, so everyone's on board with being able to take compressed images and compressed files and deal with them, both server side, client side. Code density, I've seen some sites that are just written just to be too smart for their own good, and they just have layers and layers and layers of styling, and some of it isn't necessary, and you just need to take a scalpel to that, or find a theme that has already done the math and taken the scalpel to it. Caching, which is good for repeat visits or multiple page loads, where as you get people to come to your site and visit a second or third page, they get to leverage the stuff they've already seen on previous pages. Instead of doing a load of like 6 megabytes of stuff for every page, they get 6 megabytes in the first load and substantially less in the second and third, etc. Content expiry, similar to caching, it's something where you say, just take this road. The content you've got is good. We don't need to grab the logo every page, every time. We just come back every 6 weeks for the logo. Don't worry about it. Store it on the browser, and that's a content expiry trick. Third-party assets. Because they're really important and powerful to use, they've got a lot of allure. The downside is they do a lot to hit your performance. And while you can fix all your own stuff, you can't go to Facebook and fix their code. So with image sizing, images can be too big. I found this in the case of something called the gem theme. And in there they had a handy little widget for previews in sidebars and footers. And it was showing off a 72 by 72 pixel image, but their code for calling custom sized images was kind of not working ideally. So instead it was just saying, well, give me the original image. So it was drawing 1400 by 800. So the fix there was actually to go into the gem code and disable the part that did that and just let basic WordPress do its work. Again, that's kind of it's getting too smart for its own good and going sideways. The thing back with GT metrics is when it flags images being unoptimized or large, what happens is some images like PNGs that come out from Fireworks or the replacement from Fireworks can be kind of have all their layers separated, and because of that, they're bulky and they're big. And you can actually have them flattened when they're actually just there for being delivered on the web. So it can be a difference of a fraction of the size. GT metrics will show off examples of how images can be optimized, and they'll show you the optimized image, and almost always it looks identical. It's just a fraction of the size. You can grab their optimized copy and download it and replace your bulky copy, and that gives you a performance win. And with that, usually I'll go in and I'll go, well, give me the 10 or 12 bad offenders, until it gets to the point where it's like 1% win and something marginal, so just don't keep going. And the biggie is always keep paying attention to file format choices. Back in the day when you had GIFs or JPEGs, it was good. Photo got a JPEG and logo got a GIF. But nowadays you have PNGs and SVG files. PNGs are really nice because they have transparency, they have layers of opacity, so that you can do a really nuanced thing with them. SVGs are basically, they use vectors instead of bits. So that means you can take the same image that's like 100 by 100, and with an SVG blow up to 1000 by 1000, and the quality stays the same because it's using those vectors to draw nice lines instead of just landing lines like you're dotting out a graph paper or something. So SVGs are really powerful, but they are more complicated to work with, so a lot of people don't use SVGs and stuff, but they're a really nice option, especially if you're trying to do a graphic that's when it's so complex, it can be really small. And like bitmaps, I put bitmaps into the mix because some people publish bitmaps, and even though we've had the web for 20 plus years, people are still throwing bitmaps up and hoping they work well, and they almost never ever do. But they're there. They're there, they happen. Somebody's manager gets really smart. The other thing I do sometimes if I really want to get performance is what's called CSS spriting. And this is a tricky topic, but it's really rewarding. When I said about that 100 odd files to download, and you want to get that number down, all those images and assets on your page, a lot of the pieces like arrows and magnifying glasses and logos and little graphical cues that look really nice, grabbed individually, it's just really cumbersome to suck that much down. What we can use is something called CSS spriting, where you take all the elements and you land them onto one image. This is the one grabbed from Google's search page. And all the things you see, like the little sort of O's in Google and the telephone symbols and the magnifying glass and all that jazz, all of that comes from one big image. And then it uses CSS to kind of grab little snapshots, little pieces of that large image. And then you're only making one request, but in their case, what do you have there? Before you get to all the O's in the Google and how they play with it, you usually have 30 graphics that they're replacing, or 30 file requests replacing with one request. So it's a big, easy win if you put forth the effort.
Where is that now?
That's something called CSS spriting, where Google, for example, when they give you a Google web results page, and all the graphical elements on the page are actually all coming from this one single image. They're just grabbing little pieces of that one image to give you the look of what you want. So if you were to do the same thing in your styling, like you get to the point of styling and go, well, I want this little detail here, or this little sort of accent there, grabbing all those can be intensive for slowing down your performance. But if you put the time into using CSS spriting, means you can instead offload that to one image and some CSS calls.
Is there a plugin for that, or is this you got to do this actually?
That's you kind of got to do on your own.
Right.
Yeah, I wrote a how-to for it, but the how-to, it's only like one step forward because it points to the finesse of it. There probably really calls that there should be an app for doing that because it would be really rewarding. Because I've downloaded, like I had a page where I went too far with this, and I had like these graphics that were the page width and the page height. I crammed all the graphical assets in one file, and it loaded really fast. And it was really impressive that it had all this detail, but just very few file calls and a lot of good performance. But it's finicky to pull off. With JavaScript, what you can do is, with JavaScript, you're supposed to put everything in the header, and by default, that's always where it lands. But you can put a lot of stuff into the footer. So what you can do in WordPress, you can add things like auto-optimize and other plugins, and what they'll do is they'll let you pick and choose their script or footer, and they'll let you pick and choose what you want to move around and take away from presenting in the header down to the footer, and then that lets stuff like analytics code that they want you to put in the head, but you put to the foot. And it moves it out of the way. So what happens is a lot of times when you have performance issues with JavaScript, is you'll load the page and it'll, you'll see the little waiting arrows and all the spinning things, all that stop as though you've got your whole page, but it's white. And it's white because it's waiting to render it. It's waiting to render it based on the final word from your JavaScript, which if the JavaScript's complex or big or remote, like it's a third-party thing, it's going to drag down performance massively, and you're just left with the user with a white screen. And it's a bit of a mystery if you're the end user looking, or if you're the site owner looking at analytics, because you'll go, well, they got the page fast, it looks, it looks good, it looked good for me because, probably your system's caching it. But you end up, the end user getting really disaffected because they end up with this white screen that if given time, totally will work. Just people just don't wait forever for websites because they've got things to do. But with this, it's always taking some finicky experimentation, because a lot of the ones, like I think scripts to footer lets you do individual elements can be pulled into the foot, and you see, okay, well, you slide them down, you go, okay, I want to try this one in the foot instead of the head, and you do them until you run out of good luck, and you go, okay, well, now I'm impacting the end performance of the site. It looks weird, it's not doing code right. At that point, you kind of wind it back and go, that's as far as you can take it. I don't recommend moving everything to the foot as a quick win, because it's never actually going to work, but definitely moving some of the stuff to the foot of the page using a plugin is a way to make that work. The other thing to do is look at ways to carry out compression. The one I use a lot for compression is auto-optimize. And auto-optimize will go through and collect all your different CSS sheets and JavaScript sheets that are on your site and combine them into one single file, or one file practically for the CSS, one for the JavaScript. And that works really, really well. The other thing I do is, like I said earlier, is I put gzip into the mix. And there are plugins that will add gzip to your htaccess, the stuff that controls a lot of the underpinning stuff in your WordPress install. And it's always important to back up before you proceed in case there's some snafu and it wipes your htaccess before fixing it. So that's always a caveat if you're using one of the plugins to do it. Otherwise, there is some code, and I can share it later on, that you just put into the header of your htaccess file manually, and that gives you your thing where it does gzip. Gzip, what it does is it takes anything coming out of your server and compresses it, and then it shows up in your browser and uncompresses. And because it's happening at machine speeds, it's pretty straightforward. Your machine's got a processing for it, and in extreme cases, it can be like a 50 to 1 savings.
Other thing to mention is that if you're compressing text files, you're going to be getting compression of about 90%.
Yeah.
So anything that is a large file gets shrunk drastically, which means you have all sorts of improvements for, throughput and everything.
Exactly. It's huge. Sometimes these two will get rid of extra junk, like in style sheets, tabs, line breaks, extra spaces. They'll just take those out of the mix. Because while we need to read them to make sense of it when we're looking at developing code, the machine system doesn't need it. It's smaller is better. So yeah, compression is always a great way to win, and there's lots of automated ways to accomplish that. Code density. This is why I said earlier about getting too smart for their own good. And this is probably outside the realm of almost everybody, unless they're a theme developer, is just look at what the code looks like. And if it just totally blows you, like, I don't know what any of this does, then it may be a gut check to say, well, if it's really painful for you to look at, it may be kind of painful for the system to work with. And I've seen some really high-powered talent put together painfully complex code, and that code just doesn't work all that well. Like, what happens is, because it's got so many layers in there, the styling is a beast for people to make any effect if you want to make changes. So it's that thing about code density. Because if you've got like 50 divs, the div tag is a way to wrap and do styling and blocking elements on a page. And you wrap them, you get more complex, more sophisticated looks. But you could take that too far, and I've seen somewhere it's like 10 layers of these div tags wrapping something. And by the time you're done, it's like, well, does this do anything good, right? Maybe just go back to the drawing board and come up with a more lean way to accomplish it. Because what happens is there's all the supporting stuff that goes with those layers and all that complexity, and that ramps you up to that really high megabyte count when you're just trying to deliver a web page. you know, like the example here I said is on my demo page, I delivered 468 words of content with 6.65 megabytes of HTML, CSS, and images. So I dumped out a lot of data just to simply say something you'd fit into half a magazine page. So, you know, with that, that just means that you're ending up with all this bulk, and it doesn't serve anyone. It may not even serve your design. So it's a question of, does the code look good? Does it work good? Is it big and slow? And those are tells about why you may want to dump it in favor of a theme that's a little more lean and mean. And the other thing about code density, because of code density and getting too smart for its own good, there's some styling that just doesn't convey well to slightly older systems. And I know everyone hates IE, and everyone uses, the only thing they use IE for is to get something that isn't IE. But IE is there, and it's still got a pretty big market share. And a lot of these really dense, super smart websites don't appreciate that IE may be there. And you may be shooting yourself in the foot for, depending on your audience, anything from like 2% of your audience up to 30% of your audience who look at your site and go, I can't load it. And I saw this recently with the site. I was working with a client, and they had an agency do the theming. And I thought, well, I've got IE open for something else. I'll just look at the website. Total fail. It went through all the QA checks, and they never paid attention to IE. And the site is totally unusable because they have a lot of corporate clients and some people who don't get, you know, fancy with their desktop, so they just, you know, they unwrap it, they fire up IE, and that's the only browser they've ever contemplated. That audience is gone. They're gone because the site is just so smart, tricky, cutting edge, that it doesn't pay attention to whether or not that 30% of their audience wants to see their website. So, you know, they're now down to 7 out of 10 of their clients are going to actually engage with them. The other 3 are going for somebody else who didn't get so smart. So you end up with a performance loss and just a massive way to kill your audience. Turning to the server, there's some ways you can do stuff with caching to make it work well. Sometimes you'll end up with really complex queries or things like that, and there's ways to go through and finesse it. Like if any plugin does some optimization step of taking a lot of data and collapsing it into something that stores shorthand, that's a really big win. Some of them do it in WordPress, some don't. I said earlier, I do a lot of stuff with Drupal, which is another content management system. It's all over how to deal with caching and do stuff to optimize and kind of serialize and compress stuff. And that's one of its strengths. WordPress kind of isn't as strong on that point. So what happens is you end up with some of your stuff not being in an ideal form, so it kind of grabs the page and builds it with each load, which on the server side makes it a little bit slow and a little bit less than ideal. Good plugins are W3 Total Cache, WP Cache, and John and I we talked about this, and there's a lot of.
No, I use, I want to say WP Rocket, but that's not the one I'm using right now. I can't remember the name of it. I'll know when I do my presentation. When I do my presentation, I'll keep that in mind because I'll see it because I use it on my browser, on my websites.
These caching plugins are massive for improving your performance. Yes. And what they'll do is there's free versions, and they've got some good stuff. They also have some that interact with what's called a content delivery network, so they offload some of your processing off this thing to another website for some processing wins. So I really say if you've got anything in the way of performance issues and you want to try to address it, the easy deployment is trying some of those caching plugins. Another thing that's a little more fussy on the server side is something called Keep Alive. Now, what Keep Alive does is when you get into the server and the browser talking with each other, sometimes the server will say, okay, where's this resource? And it'll just go through this whole big long form thing that the internet does for all of its traffic, figure out where it goes for its traffic. And then next time it asks for almost the same resource, like one file over, like a slightly different image, it'll go through this long form request and figure it out and go grab it. And these only take milliseconds to do, but those milliseconds add up. So Keep Alive is something where it goes, okay, remember how you found yahoo.com last time? Well, yahoo.com is still the same place, go back.
A note for Keep Alive.
Yeah.
Only your server host provider can manage Keep Alive.
Right. And
You
some
can't
ISPs
you can't do anything about it. If you find that you're not having Keep Alive isn't working for you, you have to contact your hosting provider to have them turn it on. And some hosts won't turn it on because it does suck server resources.
It does.
And it And if it's done incorrectly, which occurred to me a few years ago when I had a server it was incorrect on, it'll bring a server to its knees with as few as 300 people visiting it.
Oh, wow.
There's a finesse to it, which is why a lot of them don't do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always better to have it, but there is that hit, and you are asking your service provider to
Yeah.
deal with the hit. As I mentioned earlier, content delivery networks. Content delivery networks are great in that they will store resources and assets, images, some JavaScript, stuff like that. But more than that, it will sometimes serve it from a place that's geographically closer. Like everything on the internet still has to go through a number of hops from one machine to the next machine until it gets to its destination. A good CDN, a good content delivery network, will cut down those hops, which will drastically improve your speed. That's why if you get into Amazon hosting, for instance, they'll ask where do you want it hosted. They want to know where you want to deploy your box because you want to put your website close to your audience.
A good CDN is CloudFlare.
Yeah, they are good.
And they have a free version that you can tie into, which will deliver, I think it delivers about 60 or 70% of their services.
Yeah.
Before you got to pay for them.
So it's really good. It's really strong.
It does take some finesse though to set it up.
Yeah.
Just so you know, it's not just turn it on, plug and go. There's a lot of setup involved.
And some careful
CloudFlare.
assessment and reassessment to make sure it works.
You
for
have to monitor it too,
Yeah.
because things change, rules change, the internet changes, and CloudFlare changes the way it works. So,
Is Cloudflare Amazon?
nope,
Right, no.
Cloudflare is an independent company. They are
Oh.
one of the largest CDN providers out there. Amazon's the largest.
There's good ones, and depending on your budget, from free up to a good amount of money,
Yeah.
you can get good results. Client-side caching. There's two ways to deal with client-side caching. One of them is WordPress will do something where it tries to encourage a fresh load of everything on every page. CSS and JS and JavaScript files, it'll tack on a little unique query string and then change that with each page load. So it tries to say, okay, well, this is a new resource to load again, but you may not necessarily want that resource because it's static, so you don't need to grab it fresh every load. There are ways inside of the functions of your theme to turn it off if you add a filter in, but there's also a plugin that's pretty good and pretty low intensity. It'll just take up that query string at the tail end and let your client side cache stuff that's not really going to change. The expiry date, there's one I use called Far Futures Header or Far Futures Expiry, and it's really good in that what it'll do is it'll send a queue when it sends the kind of the underlying metadata that goes with these static files. It'll say, this won't expire for like a period of time, weeks, months, years. You want to get up to, I think usually I tune them go to 8 weeks, just as a sweet spot between don't want it super old, don't want it every time. Just enough that likely frequent visitors are going to get a win from it. And that's Far Futures Header will let you change the expiry date of the data, which sends a queue between the server and the browser, say, just come back and only look at this, only look for this every so often. And then the big bugbear is third-party assets. And it's just gotten so bad that third-party assets are all over the place, and they're really handy. Google Fonts is one I use all the time. I've got on my website, I've got a chatbot thing going on. I put in things like Google Analytics, Webmaster Code, there's stuff all over the place. And I commit this in, a lot of people are encouraged to do it too. If you want any connectivity between social media profiles and what you've got on your site and make those work well together, widgets really an easy quick fix for it. The sin is that you're at the mercy, and we'll show off the performance issues that come with that. But what happens with those is because they're big organizations, they may go for the cheapest functional solution to make their stuff work, which means that they're going to say, well, you're not paying for it. So we're going to make you hang literally for a second for every asset you request. So those all add up, and your performance is bad, but then you go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and their stuff works really well. So, you know, it helps to drive because you've got an unsatisfactory experience with your stuff and an ideal experience with their stuff. So you're more likely to feel warm and fuzzy about going to Facebook rather than a slow, dodgy website that seems to take forever to load the Facebook-like widget. So it's always important to look at this and take a careful guess, or careful, sober assessment of how much you need in the way of third-party assets. I was working with one large client locally, and they've gone through the asset thing, and they found the big chink in their armor is that they got too hooked on third-party assets, and this is dragging down the performance. In the next 2 years, what they're gonna do is a solution that drags it into server-side solutions. So the server will belt out whatever it might be, especially these third-party assets. It'll be controlled by something they can get to, as opposed to going off on the client side and grabbing a piece of load and dragging down in performance. Because then they get, when they can control it, and then if they get it to the ideal spot, great. If they don't, then they can make the assessment and say, well, we're just gonna shut off that functionality, not leave it there to hit every web page. Yeah, so for example, when I went through and I said, okay, well, what are the bad things here? Where's the fail? And I said, gzip compression, that's awesome. That's a big win. You can totally do that. That's great. Deploy it on your server. Well, the big reason why my performance is bad is because all these things coming from Facebook, like this is how many requests are coming from Facebook for that one page load, and they're all failing to do gzip compression. So they're all failing to be optimized, which is a big hit for performance and a big easy way to win. And I would do it in a second, but I have Facebook and they're not gonna do it. So I'm stuck with either losing Facebook or sticking with the bad optimization. So that's the bad thing about a big organization that isn't willing to pay attention to their results. So on the weekend, I went through for this talk and I did some optimization steps on my website just to change it up. The bad news is my F stayed an F, my E stayed an E. But the reason is that previous screen, Facebook, was, by the time it was done, was the whole fault of what was going on. What I'd done in metrics was I'd gone from 4.5 seconds, got a little bit worse in one assessment, and then down to shy of 3 seconds. So, from 4.5 to 3 seconds, faster is better, so that's good. My net size dropped. It got a little bit bigger on subsequent reloads, and the time to first byte was pretty fast to start with, so it stayed fast. But overall, I went from 4.4 seconds to 3.0. I shaved a tiny bit over here, and I shaved a handful of requests because by sticking with third-party assets, third-party things, I was stuck on how much I could take out. But at least I won partially by doing compression, by getting rid of some bulky images, by using auto-optimize, and just doing some other steps to clean stuff up. So on some sites, while mine, because of the addiction to third-party assets, was kind of underwhelming, some sites I've dealt with, I've taken them from like D's to an A. And I just thought rather than click the results, I'd show that I actually made some wins but didn't make all the wins and point out why. So yeah, so that's kind of WordPress optimization. Questions?
So if you run the GT metrics, are you looking for the page speed or the Y, whatever that was?
Why slow?
Y slow. Which is the one that matters?
I pay a lot more attention to page speed. I think Y slow is also important, but just personally, I pay more attention to page speed. I think it's a good tell about what's choking things up, and that waterfall is a big tell too. Because then you can say, well, what's blocking things up? Especially the thing that's called render blocking, where you say your page is staying white, not loading, because it's sticking on JavaScript. And then you go, well, what JavaScript is causing that? And then, yeah.
Could you hook your Facebook third-party stuff in at a later part of the render?
You could put it in the foot. You could also, in one case where we just couldn't win on the front page of some third-party assets, we moved some of those third-party assets to inner pages. The idea that the client's in, they like us. In SEO terms, if you have somebody hit one page and leave, it's a bounce, and it looks really bad. And the more people who see one page and go away, it's really bad. But if you have them into 2 or 3 pages and that level of engagement's increased, then they're probably more invested in getting something on your site. So if you say the front door pages are really lean and mean, then you can go for the subsequent pages. You can render in the foot, but sometimes Facebook will fail to do that successfully or weirdly block off. Like I've seen it overlap over standing HTML on the page. Like it won't make the region bigger, it just kind of slaps it on and does some weird stuff. So my workaround for that when I want to keep a third-party thing is I'll put it on a subsequent inner page just so it's...
And you can also use the fact that you have caching going on, so you're doing less loading from that too.
Yeah, their front page is going to be expensive to load, but you make it lean. Your other pages are more effective, but slower because of third party, and it balances out and almost makes a more even experience. So yeah, it's just picking your battles.
So what plugin do you use to move analytics code to the footer? And follow up, is there something better than Google Analytics that you would recommend?
I use script to footer.
Script footer.
That one I've had some good experiments with, because it's good to let you put it in there, and if all else fails, I'll just do it like, yeah. Sometimes if need be, I'll manually do stuff in the theme, where I'll write the line into the footer of the theme and not lean on a plugin to deploy the Google Analytics. That's an alternative to scripts to footer.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just works fine, because there is a little bit of overhead with every plugin you get, as the WordPress will go through and go, what do I do with this? What else should I do with it? Ask those questions and move on. It's a lot faster just to build it as HTML. And that's, it's also more kludgy, because you can't switch it off, and suddenly if somebody wants to switch it off, they have to be a developer instead of a site administrator, right? So yeah.
But you still like Google Analytics, you'd use it over?
I like it, it's really powerful. I kind of wish, back in the day, there used to be one that would run solely on server side, and it would be kind of blind to browser stuff and stuff, and I was using that one like about 15 years ago a lot. I spaced the name. It was great, it was really powerful. They gave you really good results you could work with, and they didn't do anything on the end user experience, apart from there's a bit of server side processing, but not really noticeable, and that was great. But analytics, webmasters, Google Fonts, they're good with their game. Like, I've never seen them show up as really bad performance in GT metrics, but they're all okay.
Question, I was
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
at mine, and it's a lot of things like the Google My Business icon and the How Is icon and
Yeah.
things like that. So it's basically Googling, finding it, saving it, and then uploading it to WordPress. So I need to be doing something different to
No, actually-
compress it, or should I be using a plugin to take care of that after I?
No, actually, what you've done there is ideal. Like, one thing I had, I was stuck on trying to get a B to an A. I just would not like me do anything. It was a little widget from something called Local Solo. And what I did there is I just said, this is linking to a profile I know. It's an asset I know. They don't have a problem with me grabbing the asset. So I just grabbed it, made it in there, I just put it in there, and then had a little region with HTML that did the thing. And I didn't rely on it going to third party. It was getting graphic from my box. It was getting HTML built manually. And it was one line of code. It was an href. So it was really straightforward. And I think what you just said is a way to do it is a good way to do it.
Okay, because it looks like they're too big. So I'm just wondering, should I be, like, I have something called, there was one that I just looked at today, Smush.
Yeah.
That basically
That
helps it.
smushes down the image size.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
should I be doing it that way? Because there's actually quite a few of them. Or should I be going back and looking at the images that I've got all saved on, my computer and actually resizing them there? Or we're not sure which.
I
one
would
to go
resize them on your machine before they go up. Get them as
Okay.
close to the ideal size as what
Okay.
they're going to be used,
about. Gotcha.
which is two things. If it's supposed to be 40 pixels across on your web page, upload the thing that's about 40 pixels across. Well, in fact, if it's going to be 40, it should be 40 when it goes up. Also, to make sure that if there's any optimization that says you can flatten this and make it a little bit less, like GIFs, when they start off and they're really bulky, I've seen them go from like 30K down to literally 1K, where it starts off, GIFs have a palette of 255 colors. In a lot of cases, you might use like 10 of those colors, but it'll ship something to say, here's what you do with all 255, and you really want to say, I only care about 10. Just take out the rest, and optimizations will do that.
Got it.
Same with JPEGs.
Okay.
Again, flattening PNGs from the version you compose with and build to the one that just belts out a PNG.
So I'm just trying to get a handle of what the sizes are. Is there like a chart or something that tells you, like, if you just want a little thumbnail click, it should be about this, or if, like, how do you figure out these sizes?
That varies from theme to theme.
It depends on your design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every theme, like a project I'm working on right now, I went in there and I found out what the maximum upload size the theme wants, and then I did a list for my client of all 14 images that are created from uploading the one image, so that they will know how they have to create the image so that they get the proper crop.
And that's the thing WordPress does, is it will build all these
It
optimized
creates all
sizes.
those images. And you mentioned Smush. Smush is a good thing to use.
Yeah.
Because it will, again, even if you think you've optimized your image and uploaded it, Smush will find even more space to remove from it.
And GT metrics too. It'll give you optimized stuff, and I've only once turned down a GT metrics suggestion, because,
Is that part of the paid GT metrics?
yeah, gtmetrics.com, when you go and you load it, it says you have to fix these images. it'll give you.
It'll
what
give you a
image-
list of the images.
It'll
But
show you.
is that part that you have to pay for?
No,
No, no,
that's
no.
free.
Oh, that was my
It
question.
gives you a link to the optimized image. It'll, this is the better image.
Oh, okay.
And you just go, oh, thank you, grab it, download it, use it in place. And it's ideal and it's free. And like I said, in all the cases I've tried it, only once has it given me a crappy optimized result.
I mean, I found Smush just took care of any problems.
Smush is good.
Which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Well worth the money to WPMU Dev for the pro version. Because you can bulk smush your entire site.
I was looking at that instead of 50 at a time.
Yeah.
Who has that kind of time in their day?
Nobody. What I do is that when I inherit a site that's got a mess, I just start bulk smush and it's
Yeah.
smushing 10,000 images. I leave the page open and continue doing other work.
Right, that was my day today.
Yeah.
But I need the pro.
It's well worth the money for the pro version.
On the topic of CSS sprites,
Yeah.
I'm making a new website that uses a lot of icons, and I was about to use that until I discovered this method where if it's vectors, you can turn it into a font and
Yeah.
then use it as a font.
Well,
kind
Font
of-
Awesome totally does
yeah,
that.
like
so
Font
Font
Awesome.
Awesome, but you can do your own.
And I tried that, and so far the speed results has been crazy fast.
Oh, yeah.
That's another good
Yeah.
one.
Now you're downloading text.
You're basically,
Yeah.
it's doing a treatment on text, so it's a big win.
Yeah, I was just surprised how I can't remember how many icons I've started testing out. Like, I think I tried 30 just to try it, but because I made the vectors really simple. It's like they're 10 kilobytes each or something.
Yeah.
It's so fast.
Another thing I'll do too is SVGs.
Oh, yeah.
They're a little finicky to get going with, but Illustrator outputs SVGs.
Yeah.
And, if you really want to nerd out, they're XML code. So you could go through and move the vectors around. And
Yeah.
I did something with
Is
somebody.
there an issue with
It's not 100% adoption.
That's not
IE will
wrong.
work with SVGs, but it's less of a guarantee.
Eventually you have to put on a site of warning. You're using IE. Please upgrade to one of these better browsers.
Yeah.
I've seen graphic designer websites that do that.
I had to do that for one of my clients because it was just too much work to fix every little niggling
Yeah.
for IE. And you just finally put up a warning that says if you're using IE, you need to use this browser here, or the site's just not going to work.
I had one problem years back where it was like only so many years back. It was IE6, which is like a product that they sunset like 5 years before I was doing the work. And the problem was there was one really vocal person in the decision tree, and they said like this isn't working on my browser, so you have to go back and do it again. And there was no way to win that argument. It wasn't a technical it was a technical topic, but it wasn't a technical argument. So you're just stuck. And it's like, okay, you know what? I know who's really presenting themselves as important and cutting the checks, and he just did it.
That's pretty much it. Right, that it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
thanks,
Thank
Shawn.
you. Thanks for your
Thank
time.
All right, so we'll take a brief break here, and then I'll come back and give my presentation. SE 101, I'll be covering some of the things he's got there, but it's going to be a lot of actual what to do on your page or post, and things you need to do for your site to improve your SEO with Google.
Like, Yo stuff.
Useful, no, it's not even just Yo stuff, it's actual how to do things.
These chairs aren't good enough. Yeah, the
I have
desk.
to hold out for a place that has recliners.
Yes. No, I just go to sleep.
Shawn, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So when you said it will tell me if there's like another, this is the waterfall,
Mm-hmm.
so it looks like I should be focusing on all this stuff, right?
Yes, nice. When you look at the color coding, sorry, I didn't mean to do
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
Talks about blocking, sending, waiting. Blocking is just the hang time before it gets to it. Sending is it actually says, hey, this is the instruction you want to send to it. It's almost nominal. It's like, it's your person. It's very, very small.
Okay,
Your waiting is kind of a tell about how good that third-party source is, but whether or not their infrastructure is good and they respond quickly,
okay,
or whether they just have some weird funkiness that makes it wait forever and a day.
slow, okay,
And then your receiving is the actual payload that comes back, which should always be fast, but that's not always the case, and that's where you buy your delays.
okay.
But I saw one case of a client, and we got a huge row because somebody connected was like, literally invested in the company that was doing it, and they had like, this is like 10 years ago, They had an 8-second hang time before it came back for a really small payload. And the problem was that their server infrastructure wasn't all that good. So instead of doing something to kind of belt it out as fast as possible, kind of clear its throat, be done with work
Yeah.
and move on, it was just waiting for every day and then belting it out. And that was a huge performance loss. So
Gotcha.
that's the thing, as you can see here. But some of these are kind of subordinate, like you go through here and you'll see only some of these kick in after other stuff does this work, like down here, these things.
Yeah,
This has to happen before these can start. So that's render block. That's where it goes, you know, we're not done. We don't think we have a final picture of what we're supposed to do with this page,
yeah,
and we'll mess with it.
right, and
Yeah.
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 So this is what I was trying to, well, that's why I was using that
But your
swoosh
page
today.
speed will be a big tell about your places you can win with.
Right, and, yeah, cause I was looking at these, and I mean, like, a lot of them are just like the, you know, Victoria Real Estate Board, that's just the little logo, and
Yeah.
same with the house icon and the YouTube and the Google My Business, like, these are all just the little icons. So I just need to make those smaller, is that?
You can make them smaller. That means because you're grabbing so many little icons, that may be a candidate for the CSS spreading thing. And with that, you don't get anything super, like, you see Google's and they have a big grid, right?
Yeah.
And you pick the X and Y, and it's really complicated. It works as a really long script. And then you just say, well, I want this chunk.
So did you get your client moved all
And then that gets you all.
fine, Scott?
You don't have to make it.
Pardon me?
Your clients all moved?
Script or a long.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yeah,
And then
did you see that?
serve those pieces.
Okay,
The other trick I've done.
Did you notice that? Or you just
Where?
Well, I noticed the
The
name server changed over because I get notification when the SSL certificate is issued, and my server won't issue it until the domain is pointing to my server.
Yeah, so it's up now.
Yeah.
I noticed the name server changed over this morning, but I was out at a meeting, so it didn't get changed there.
Yeah, I got notification this morning of the new SSL cert,
Okay.
and that's oh, good, he changed the name server.
Or, you know, swooping, or however you want to work.
Yeah, they took a little bit
And then
of
you
time.
go into
but
Polygon
I
editor,
don't know,
which
the-
has them, other ones are there.
okay, we're using that.
Okay.
Who's their
And then you can name
provider
the
take that long? Because the name server change is usually instantaneous. Who's their domain
So then you
registrar?
want to be
A
your
pretty
term
obvious
master, your
company.
one, and
I'm
something else.
actually
So
gonna look into getting the domain transfer over to you, because I assume you register it as well.
Polygon editor.
Yeah, all my domains register. I am a reseller for Wild West, which is basically GoDaddy in disguise.
Image maps are low
So it's
cap.
very nice and excellent, and it's the same price as GoDaddy. I just get to make $1 off the domain registration versus GoDaddy making all the money.
I don't even know who those
Yeah,
people
so
are.
I'm gonna try and, well, we'll see how it goes, but I'm gonna probably try and get transcripts, because they're terrible. They're called Coolcom.
Never heard of them.
Anyway, so it's just kind of like.
They
That would be
were, apparently they were a small company in DC,
Yeah.
and then at some point,
Yeah, so they have the
they
product
were
website,
bought
we have
by
like
some
5
small
icons.
company that doesn't
And one
care.
of them appear
Ah,
just so.
well.
Yeah.
And they really don't care. I was telling you about them actually, that was many months ago, I tracked down
Right.
their supplier.
Yeah.
So I
I
just.
got their
image
supplier
map,
to threaten
image,
them.
What chunks of the image.
And that's the only way I was able to get them to do anything.
Gotcha.
That's that
Yeah.
company.
Okay, perfect.
The finest
And that's
web
what we're
developer
doing right now,
detective
whether we
work I've ever
continue on or
done.
we start over with a different theme and build a new site.
Yeah, I've seen people
So
with
is
that.
that like, what have you?
Yeah, same company, Coolcom. Never buy from them ever.
Yeah, I never heard of them, so I don't have to
Are they
worry.
the
But
full common that used to be in town or is in town?
I think they used to. I don't know if they're Victoria, but I think they used to be on the island.
Okay.
They're not anymore. Their main office is in Toronto. but
Okay.
They don't care. It's like a shell of the company.
Uh,
It's like this stuff, right, that we're
Right.
talking about.
Yeah, that's my client had them because
Yeah,
it's
that
on
can
the
totally be
same
done with
one.
just
It's
one or
close
two
to local,
image
when they
maps.
sold
And
it,
probably
it's
what I
a
do there is
shell
say, well, what's the mobile experience like?
Yeah.
And you can say, well, all of them
My
are
goodness,
clear
I met
desktop,
someone else.
and they're gonna go like in 3 bands by the time you get to mobile. 3 image maps.
Gotcha.
And then it's like, it's low tech, it's not super.
I realized today,
Cool.
next
Yeah.
October,
Works 100%.
I have been doing web hosting for 20 years.
Oh wow. Yeah, put that all over your site.
I started my first server in 1999 because the company I was with was giving me grief. And so what I did was I researched where he was getting his servers from, and I went in and leased a server and transferred all my stuff off, just in time. Just, I think a month later, he collapsed.
Oh really?
But I knew, so I was having grief with my sites. I just needed to get them under my own control. And since then, I've been running my own servers. I've been as few as 1 server, and I've been up to 7 servers. Now I'm down at 4.
All right.
So expand and contract as business grows and contracts. I realized today, it's next October, where my marketing manager's working up a promotion for 20th anniversary.
20% off for 20th anniversary.
I don't know. I don't like giving deals like that. I don't know. Once you make a sale, people start to expect them.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, I just don't do it. And I charge more than most hosting companies, but my value for my hosting is well worth what I charge, so. All right, well, I guess that we can pull it together, and this is going to be WordPress SEO 101 for WordPress. Yeah, redundant, I know, as I talk to myself and get started. So what I'm going to be talking about is using WordPress, or doing SEO on your WordPress website and going into the post pages, what Google looks for, the kind of things you want to pay attention to while you're creating your posts and pages. So let's see if we can get this thing. There we go. So SEO is something that you do have to put some time into, but it shouldn't suck all of your time, unless you're being paid to do pure SEO, or SEO is the most important thing of your business. You can't do without it. You've got to do something. This is a beginner level outline of what you can do to improve the overall SEO of your website. So I don't forget something. So one of the first things you'll have to do is you need to collect some information. If you don't already have this information, you need to create the accounts and get them set up for your website. You need Google Webmaster Tools and get it connected to your site through Yoast. You need a Google Analytics account. You may or may not want a Bing account. Surprisingly, Bing, depending upon what your business is, Bing can bring you up to 70% of your business. Because Bing is a very unique search engine. They get a lot of search traffic. So you want to think about Bing, get a Bing account. And you can tie that Bing account into your site with the Yoast tools. Yoast has it set up to just include the Bing information and have it tied in. I haven't used my Bing account in a long time because most of my traffic comes from Google. But if you're doing something that involves arts or crafts or things like that, it seems Bing is the place where that comes from. The largest chunk of traffic comes from Bing, from those places. SSL for your site. If your site does not have an SSL certificate, you need one. Now, it should be free. Virtually every host out there on the planet now gives away SSL certificates for free, except for GoDaddy, Bluehost, and anybody from EIG hosting. They want to still charge for a certificate that is given away free. If they're going to charge you for it, you might consider the cost that they're going to charge you for that certificate plus what you're paying hosting, and move to another hosting provider. When you figure out the price difference, you'll probably pay about the same. And then you won't ever have to worry about your SSL certificate again. The only reason you pay for an SSL certificate now is if you need a specific type of SSL certificate, meaning you have multiple domains, multiple subdomains, you need to have a higher level of security on your site to match for taking card payments or something. Some of them require, depending on what you're selling, different levels of SSL. But the basic SSL certificate that virtually everyone needs is free. So you'll want to get that taken care of on your site. Install and configure the Yoast SSL certificate. And time spent on this is well worth it. If you saw my first presentation a couple of months ago, I think I covered Yoast. I've still got the video up on my YouTube channel. And there's a link. I'll make these notes available, or these slides available, but there's a link in here that links directly to the video that explains how to use the Yoast plugin and how to configure it and how to connect to Bing and everyone else. It's a good hour and a half of your time just configuring the Yoast plugin. Okay, so what do we want to talk about? We want to talk about what does Google index for your website. This information is rather important to know because they index up to 14 different areas of your web page. And they're looking for multiple things, and because their algorithm gives weight to different things at different times, you never know what's going to get the most weight. So you want to take care of as many of these items as possible. They look at your post and page title. They look at your page metadata. They look at the date last modified. They look at the date published. They look at your images. They look at your contents. They look at how your content is. They compare the keywords in your content. They look for keyword stuffing, on and on and on. They look at your headings. They look at your categories. They look at your SEO title. They look at your SEO meta description, which can be different from your meta description for the post. So how do you deal with those things? Well, we'll start with a checklist of a few simple ones first. One of them you'll want to look at, and we'll bounce back and forth here between this and my live site, so you can actually see on an actual post what we're looking at here. And I'll slide to this side here. Okay, so what they look at, we'll start with the title. Your title can be quite long. It can be as long as you want it to be. Now Google might only list or list the first 150 characters of it, but they'll index the entire thing. So it doesn't really matter. If you need to have a shorter URL, you can come in here and edit this for your pretty link and shorten it down from the title, because the pretty link is automatically created by whatever you make a title out of. It never hurts to do this, unless you're putting out a link that you need people to remember. There's really no need to change it from a long title. So you'll want to do that. Your content, you'll want to go through your content and make sure it is edited for a human. The days are long gone when you hear, you'll still hear the advice, surprisingly, of put these keywords in there, write these keywords, write for search engines. No, the algorithms have moved on. They use what they call artificial intelligence, what I just call machine learning. They can figure out from how they read your content whether you wrote it for a machine or you wrote it for a human. So they look at that now. Your excerpt, make sure you've got your excerpt. If you don't see excerpt here when you're doing it, when you're going through, go up here to the top of the page and click on screen options, and you might not see excerpt down there. It's not automatically default turned on. So go to the top of your page or post, do this once, you'll never have to do it again with your login. Another login has to do this. Every login gets to customize their post areas. So you'll go up here and you'll click the boxes for all the things you want to show up that you can edit. And two of the big ones that are not clicked automatically is the excerpt and the author. Because your author is important if you have multiple authors or you use multiple accounts on your site. I have 3 different accounts on my site that get used. Mine, my marketing manager, and my office assistant. And when they post, I make sure that they change the author to reflect me. Because what that does is that gives the authority to the post. And you want the authority to the post tied to the main account for the site. That way it all flows uphill. So you'll want to make sure you've checked out all the different things you got there. And these boxes will vary depending on what plugins you have in here. Like a lot of these boxes you see here, you might not see on your website. Because these are a whole bunch of different plugins I've got in my site. So where that's reflected, of course, is your excerpt. Now your excerpt can be anything you want. This should be a carefully crafted SEO'd excerpt. Because probably a good 50% of the time or more, Google will use this excerpt for your listing in Google. This excerpt is not something your visitors will see, but it's published in the code in the back end. So Google sees it. Along with, they see your publish date. Now, one of the interesting things about publish date and last modified date. Publish date, Google uses, especially for a brand new post, to know how fresh the content is. But last modified date, you can leave your published date, let it get as old as 4, 5, 6 years, and you might have written a evergreen article that only requires from time to time a little bit of refresh, a couple of changes to it. Even if it doesn't require them, every 6 months or so, go in and change something. It'll get a new modified date. Google will see that modified date when they're indexing you, and they'll say, hey, this content's fresh, even if the published date is old. So they might re-index it, and it might get pushed higher in the search rankings, just on that alone. So that's something to think about doing. Where is my, there it is. I've got it down here in the bottom. Down here at the bottom is my author. And you see I've got 3 different authors down here. So you choose the author that is most relevant for the entire site to get all of the credit for everything. Because Google does use authority now as a major search engine tool, ranking tool. And I must have scrolled right by it. Ah, here it is. And if you've got Yoast in there, this is where you're going to be spending a little bit of time on your post. If you want to spend time, if you set up Yoast correctly, you can spend minimal time here. There's very little to do unless you're starting to work on fine-tuning your SEO, which is what I'm just now starting to do to my sites. I'm starting to find time to fine-tune. Actually, I found time to train my office manager to fine-tune. So it means I have to know how to do it so I can train her. So you go in here and you start modifying your items here. You can start by modifying your title. And right now I've got the wrong setting in my Yoast. So I might want to go change that. Because you'll notice one of the things that happens, what it does for you is it puts the title of your post and then your website title. And we're going to skip over to the website title in a minute, but it's separated right here by 2 dots. And I found out something not long ago you can do with Yoast, which is really important for Google, which I didn't know this little trick either, is you want to use the bar. Where's Yoast SEO? We'll change something nice and live here.
I can't really see any of that because I have really, really bad eyesight.
Oh, come
So
on
I
up to the
have
front.
I have to unplug my computer.
Oh.
So sorry.
That's all right. I'm sorry about that.
So is this all going to be on a video?
The video's online, so I don't know how much of this will be seen because I'm kind of in the way of the camera a little bit. I'm trying to avoid the camera, but I didn't think about how much I needed to be in front of the computer when I jumped up here. Search appearance or console, social appearance. So in search appearance, what you're going to want to do is, where is that setting? General.
Maybe you could dim the lights and that up a bit, or?
You could try. I think I don't know if we turn down just the front. There's 2 switches, so maybe. Yep.
There you go.
That help? Nope.
I'm blind.
Oh, not that.
No, that's too much. Okay, so at any rate, where it is when you're setting up the Yoast tool, I chose the dots because I thought they were cooler looking and they separated nicer. But the bar, the up and down bar, it turns out that's a delimiter. And when Google is indexing your site, it sees that as a delimiter and it indexes both sides of that separately. So it actually adds to your indexing of your site and it enhances your SEO. So that's something I only recently learned. I thought, okay, I need to do that to my sites because I realized I didn't have that set. And I didn't even talk about that when I talked about the Yoast setup because I just didn't know that.
I'm still in dash land, so.
Yeah, well, I used to use the dash line because I thought it was nice too, but I went to the dots because it looked cooler in a dash. But I just found out the bar is a delimiter.
You must have mentioned it because I've set it to that and I set it following along with you at the
Yeah.
talk, so there you go.
So So you wanna do that. You can go in here, edit your title. You can also edit what shows up here in the slug. You can edit this slug that'll show up in the search engine. Okay, whereby, you might wanna put something simpler in there, but it won't change the URL. It still goes to the proper URL. It's just a slug that shows in Google. So it's a way to enhance your listing in the Google. Now Google might not always use what you got here because they have a mind of their own, and they might decide, we know better than you do on your site. We're gonna do it our way. So that's not often the case, but it is the case with Google. You might want to go in and tweak your meta description, even make it something different than the excerpt from the site itself. Using a little more information. And again, you can hit the limit of the characters here, and you can go a bit beyond it. Google will only show the limit of the characters, but they still index the rest of it. The idea, though, is to think about when you're writing this stuff for Google, the title and the other bits. Think Twitter back when it was brand new with 140 characters. Get to the point. Tell them your most important things in the first few words as quickly as you can.
Is that date November 22nd or 7th?
Yep, November 22nd. This post was just published.
Is it the published date or the what was the other one?
This is the published date.
Modified date.
This is the published date here. Google does not show the modified date. They don't show the modified date. They only show the published date if they show it at all. Like if you turn dates off on your site, Google won't show that. Like some people turn off the dates on their posts and pages because their content is either evergreen or they won't want people to know how old it is. It always irritates me when I hit a website, I read an article, and I'm obviously like, this stuff seems out of date, and I scroll up and there's no date. It's like, I can go into the code and look to find out what it is, but it's just too much work.
Can you turn off dates on some but not others, or is it
a
a web page wide dates on?
It's usually site wide. You probably can do it on individual posts, but you'd probably have to find a plugin to allow you to turn off the date on the individual post. Yeah, it's usually site wide. And most new themes that have the control panels give you the ability to turn dates on and off, along with turn on authors, turn off authors. They give you a whole bunch of controls for all these little things that are sometimes needed, not needed. So that's where that one goes. Again, also up inside the Yoast tool, the Yoast meta block on your post, you can get in here and adjust this content on how you want it to show in the search results. Like you can have it default and show as yes. You can set it as no in here. There's very seldom a time you'll want to set it as no. Sometimes you might be building a landing page that you don't want indexed, a specialty page that you're marketing in some way or another and you don't want it indexed. You can turn that indexing off. You can set the settings for the robots, how the robots will see this page, either to index it site-wide defaults, no image index, meaning you don't want the images on that page indexed by Google. You can have it to not archive this, no snippet. There's lots of little tweaks you can do in here. And these are for things when you're fine-tuning the SEO for the site or for the post itself. This is for fine-tuning on a per post basis, not site-wide. And I recently used all of these things when I created a specialized form for a client, and we wanted to make sure that that form was not indexable. We needed that form to be as hidden as possible from Google. And with this, I use this stuff here to hide it from Google and other search engines that behave themselves. You're dependent upon search engines that actually obey the rules when they come to your site, which is probably about 60 or 70% of the bots that hit your site obey the rules. The ones that don't obey the rules are not the ones people use for searching. Those are the ones that are just indexing the web for their own purposes. The canonical URL, this one can be very important to you. The canonical URL is where you're going to point the link power of this page to. If you leave it blank, the default is it points to itself. You can take it, and you might want to do this for some things, or duplicate content in particular, like you produce one page and you produce another that's similar content, point page B back to point A, page A for conical. Or sometimes you'll point a page back to the root URL. So what happens, Google comes in, it sees the post, goes, okay, and says, okay, the conical, all the link juice for this page is credited to this page. And that's an important aspect to know, is where that stuff, where that link power flows to, and what you'll want to do with it. Okay, let's jump back. Oh, that's where I was going to go. Page titles, or site titles. This is something that I covered in my basic setup of WordPress. But as I've been learning and progressing in SEO lately, because I've had to learn a whole lot more, I found out a bit more about site title and tagline and how useful and important they are for you, to your site. Site title, you need to make it about the site as much as possible. I just recently changed mine. I used to have wppluginsAtoZ, and then I had, I can't remember, it was WordPress podcast. You know, it was, I didn't say a whole lot. I didn't realize how important it was. So I've changed the site title and tagline. WordPress plugins plugin reviews and tips for WordPress. Giving a little more information, because that information is indexed by Google. You know, it's picked up in the code. It's not always displayed on the site. In fact, it's not displayed on my site because I have a logo in place. So this stuff here is hidden behind my logo. So you'll want to fix these and tweak them and have them one relate to the other. And your first one will be your site as much as possible, because that's the one that gets stuck. That's the one that gets stuck after your name or after your page title. God, I hate that. There it is. That's the one that your page title here, and then it puts your site title. And those are the two things that Google lists. So you'll want to have this information there.
You said the taglines are important too?
Tagline is just as important as the site title.
Yeah.
Leaving it blank, you're missing out on an opportunity for SEO.
And always make sure to change it from just another WordPress site.
Yeah, that's the default in there. You'd be surprised how many sites I've come across that have been there for 3 and 4 years,
Yep.
and it still says just another WordPress site. Because nobody ever looked at it when they set it up. Or the ones that are still set for their time zone in Greenwich Mean Time 0. Instead of whatever time zone their business and website is located in. Okay, so post-blog SEO. So you'll want to go over items to improve your SEO, dealing with the open graph tags. And for open graph tags are the tags that are used by Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and others. Information that's put into your code that Google picks up and indexes. You know, they use it as part of their indexing algorithm. Your open graph tags look a lot like this. From here to here is just the open graph tags on one page on my site. So I've got open graph tags for article, open graph tags for images, open graph tags for Twitter, and the Facebook ones must be missing. But these are controllable through Yoast, okay? Except for your article and others. These are controllable through your theme and your tags. The reason I got a lot of tags here is, I can't remember which post. Oh, this is the 383. This is the most recent post. When we come down to my post here, I have this many tags on the post.
So it cooks your tags into open graph elements.
Yeah, put your tags into open graphs elements. So choose them wisely or most appropriate for what your post is about.
And Google doesn't, when it checks, look at that and go, whoa, you're stuffing it?
Not
It's
anymore.
gotta be on point.
As long as they're all on point. All of these are on point for exactly what I do.
Yeah.
These are the keywords I use in all of my videos. It's basically me repeating the keywords everywhere for everything I do. Okay.
It's a whole other topic, but those tags and the page relevance factors into how much the cost of Google advertising is, for instance. Where if your topic you're advertising on and your topic on your page don't line up, it costs more to advertise.
Oh, okay. Costs so much to advertise, I don't care.
Well, yeah.
Words I want to advertise.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, golden.
And I'd already talked about this, was to ensure the author for your post is filled out as completely as the, I didn't talk about this. Author info is not just the author you choose, but when you've got your author info, you can go into your users for your authors. And fill out all of this info here. Okay, author name, nickname you're going to use, the author's website. I'm still surprised that this one is still here. It's like, really, you can't yank those yet? Google Talk, Google Plus page, Twitter username. Twitter username is an important one, because when we bounce back to that tag here, I'm gonna get backwards, there we go. We'll bounce back to these tags for a second. Down here, there's one per Twitter creator. And what I realized here was when I had my ex-co-host for my site, he got credited with the last post accidentally, didn't get changed. His Twitter name shows up as the creator for Twitter on this post. And so I went in and changed it to me as the author. So it's important to fill it out. You get lots of little credits in different places. And the credits are very important now, because author, I was using the word, authenticity, authority, thank you.
Yeah.
Author authority is very important to Google, and authority for an article is very important.
Is there somewhere to put like a professional qualification? I work for a lawyer.
Yep.
Just kind of put it in there.
You may need to add a plugin to add additional fields to the user profile.
Okay.
Because you only get so many fields in a default profile setup. You get, well, you can put their biographical info, and you can use HTML in that for their bio.
And put in their accreditation.
Yeah. So you can put it there without adding additional fields. Yoast gives you these additional settings, which I haven't filled out. Title to use for the author page, author meta description, stop or disallow SEO or search engines. And that's it. That's all I have in this one. But I do have some sites where I work on for the clients. We add additional things so they can fill out these big bios that are then used in other areas of the site. But that information is carried in multiple ways from different plugins.
Well, if you bring in your Twitter information and you publish in multiple places, like you write for other places and they also feature your Twitter ID,
Yep.
then that creates linkage between all the places you publish that reference your Twitter ID.
Yep.
So it becomes that
He
common
doesn't have Twitter.
point.
I don't think he has Facebook.
And something else, if you're dealing with a local business, like right now, I'm working on a project for a local business here, and we're working on the full proper integration of Google Places into it. When you go to the Google Places page, it also lists, we found these other, I won't say references, but
Other businesses?
no,
Other-
when people say good things about you.
Oh, yeah, other reviews.
Reviews, thank you. When they find reviews, it lists the reviews from Facebook in there.
Right.
says we found these other 5 ones from Facebook, we found these other ones. It lists all the other social medias on the Google Places. So that information, by getting linked and back and forth, helps in those areas, and it can help you rise to the top. Now, I don't have one listed in Google anymore. I used to have an article that showed up. If you hit Google, you do a search on Google, sometimes you see an article at the top and it's got a bulleted list of things. That is a very specific article that they think answers your questions. Some people have got those articles, they wrote them articles 4 and 5 and 6 years ago, and they're still at that #1 spot. And it's because their article is really relevant. And if you want to take that spot, you can. It'll take you some effort, but you have to write an article that is so relevant that Google thinks, oh, somebody's looking for such and such. Hey, this article with these point bulleted stuff, that's relevant. Bang, and they list it up for them. I had one there for a while on what to do in a WordPress emergency. And I've since lost that because I've not been paying attention to my stuff.
And do you have to do the bullet points, or are they picking that out and they're actually putting the points together?
I don't know how they do it. I had the bullet points on my post, and the other people I've seen, every time I go to there, they have the bullet points.
They do.
Not at the top, but somewhere in the post.
Right.
So it's probably
Coming from that.
It's probably coming from that. And that's maybe one of the reasons why Google picks it up and does something with it.
Bullet points are a big win for SEO because they make it concise, and more than that, from an architectural, like from a coding standpoint, they organize it. You go, this is organizational important stuff, so it makes it brief and clear.
Right. So they're probably looking for an unordered list tag.
Yeah,
unordered list or a LI tag, OL or LI tag. Now, what that ties into after I get through this little bit here, fixing your navigation on your website. Okay, your navigation being your menus, be it across the top, down the side, or whatever you want to do, you have total control over that navigation of what you're wanting to do with it. You want to add attributes to it. Now, you can create the page title, which most navigation is done from a page title or a custom link, page or a post or a category title. It's usually how your navigation is made. You can have that as long as you want. It's like one of the things I heard recently in some of the SEO stuff I've been listening and learning about is everyone has an about page. But Google comes in and said about what? About who? About where? About why? About what? You know, what does the about mean? And I realized this was a problem for me too. It's like my about page is just say about. That's the title of my about page, about. Well, that's what you want for the menu, but that's not what you want for the search engines to find. So what you need to do is you need to go into your menu structure on your site, and in your menu structure, you can go in, open up your item, and you can set up so that you can set a title attribute in there that Google will read instead of what the menu item is. And this title attribute is very important.
So that way your navigational phrase can be short and to the point.
That's right.
But your title can be long and explicit.
Yeah. So what you do is you create your page with the long and explicit title. Okay? Then you go in, you create your menu item. Wrong widgets. I want the menus. You'll want to first, again, screen options at the top. It's not as snappy as it should be. There it is. Screen options at the top. They only have a few of these boxes checked for you. I generally, whenever I'm working on it, I just go through and check them all. Because I never know which one I'm going to use. It adds a little bit of stuff to it, but not a lot. Okay, once you get that checked, when you go down to an About page menu, now I haven't fixed this one yet, but your navigation label, this is the label that is shown to the public. It's what the public sees, about us, about whatever you want it to be, however long or short. Then what you can do is you go into the title attribute and you put the whole title there. The link target, you may or may not use that. The description, you can go in and put a description. put a description in of what this link is all about. Again, more SEO areas for you to tweak and add more information that is relevant to your website. And these are areas that you can set and forget. You know, once set, you can forget them. The CSS classes, the link relationships, you don't, unless you're getting into advanced SEO, don't worry about those at the moment. I'm still working my way through the link relationship. Link target, this is something you may or may not want to use. I usually use this when I'm linking to something that jumps off of my website, or if I have a very specific reason, I have the page open in a new window. That's all it does. And again, depending on the plugins you can have even more things available here. So that's a very useful item to do for your site, is set up your link attributes. And remember, turn on the link attribute, set your navigation label, and then set your link attribute and give it a big long description, which is what Google will pick up and see and attribute to that label. Now the other area it hits is for reader machines. For those that are deaf or not deaf, but blind, hard to see, or whatever, and they're using reader machines to read your site, when it comes down and reads it, they'll pick up this title attribute, and you can tell them exactly what that link is for. So try not to make it a paragraph in length, because they might not want to listen that long. But the point being is you can help with accessibility to your website at the same time. And there's lots of these little things throughout WordPress that allow you to enhance it for the readability. And if you're doing things to enhance for readability, Google starts to like you more too. And as much as I don't overly love Google, I have to sort of cater to them because they are the gorilla in the room right now. Next thing you'll want to work on is internal linking to your website. Internal linking is as important, if not more important, than the external links coming from other sites. You need to link from your content to your content, back to your content, and back again. As much and as often as you can. Anytime you're creating a post that you're talking about content within your site, you need to link to that content in your site. Not only does it help your readers who might want to find that content, it helps Google, because Google goes, oh, you think this content's still important. Oh, it's still in your site. So yeah, you really think it's important. Oh, you're pointing back here. You're pointing back here. It keeps Google bouncing through, and it helps raise those pages up in the rankings just by having internal links. They do have to be relevant links. That's a big thing. And relevant links and natural links. Meaning, yeah, go check out this accessory. And the word accessory is what the link is. You know, not trying to game the system. They need to be natural links.
The other thing too with that is bounce rate. As you have people, like a bounce rate is, you hit one page, you disappear. If you go from internal link to internal link, that knocks down that bounce rate to the point where it's negligible. And at that point, it says that you've engaged with, the user's engaged with the website, which says the user's gotten value, which Google says that other users will get value. And even though the other people may show up with one page, bounce and disappear, multiple pages, as some people are just kind of leading the way, gives Google an impression your site's strong.
So I had an audit, Alexa audit, where it says that we have too many internal links.
Really?
Yep.
There's
I
a
think
sweet
Alexa's,
spot.
I didn't think you could have too many internal links.
I had one client that went too far, and when they hit 100, I said, whoa, dial it back, because they wanted 100 on average per page. And
Oh, well, that I think is a little ridiculous.
yeah, but 20 is great, 100 is too far, and there's some spot in between the two where you've done it well, but you've gone too far.
I didn't know you could do too many,
We
but
have like 20 per page, and they said it's too much.
That's a little too picky. I've seen 20 is pretty common.
to me, it seems that to me, it's as many links as I need to connect to my stuff.
As is natural.
As is natural.
Yeah.
To me, what it is natural. And if 100 links is what's natural for that page, that would be the links, number of links. I mean, you got to consider how many links you have just in your menu. I mean, my internal links on just my menu alone is about 25 or 30. That's my base right there. Once I start adding into the post, I'm above that. Because you count, the links counted are every link from the top to the bottom, including your menu.
Including your footer too?
Including your footer too.
Meta tags.
Meta tags, well, I'm talking about the stuff that,
Yeah.
everything is an actual link that a bot can follow. A bot says, hey, this is a link, we're going there.
Well,
So,
that's probably fine.
so I don't know. I don't know what Alexa's doing. I haven't used Alexa in ages. I know one thing about Alexa, you can game the hell out of it with no effort. I actually tried it one time to experiment. I took my site from somewhere in the billionth area, I took it down to less than 1,000, and I did nothing to my site except game their algorithm. So I know Alexa's, I don't trust Alexa as far as I can throw it. For some reason, lots of people do. You know, I trust Google a little more, but not a whole lot. Meta description. I think I already touched on that. Tweaking on your meta description. Make sure you have the content in it, but the most important part in that first sentence. That first sentence should be like writing a tweet from 6 or 7 years ago when Twitter was still good. Back when they were actually useful. I remember when they were useful. You remember when they were useful? That's how we met.
Yeah.
That's how we met, was back when Twitter was actually useful.
Some orange guy took
It
over
had
Twitter.
discoverability at some point.
What's that?
It had discoverability at some point.
Well, it actually had community, and it wasn't a whole bunch of people whining and pitching fits back and forth about whatever their peeve of the day is.
A lot of people gaming the system with bots too.
Oh yeah, it's massively botted now.
Yeah.
I was actually part of the problem about 4 years ago. I had 120 Twitter accounts.
What?
So it's like, it's probably still just as gameable. So it's like, yeah, I was part of the problem. Okay, and one of the things you don't want to do with your site, don't stay static. You know, from time to time, go through and refresh information. Refresh your tagline if it needs to be refreshed. You know, maybe your direction of your business has changed or something else has changed. Give it a change. Go in and change metadata, tweak it from time to time. You can set up default metadata in the Yoast plugin. So you can set that up to be used in places. Your best metadata you're going to use, if you're going to spend any amount of time on any page, make it your home page. Go through your home page with a fine-tooth comb. Focus on that. That is your gateway, your front door that Google gives the most amount of weight to for your entire site. So you want to focus on that. Use all the techniques from, you know, optimizing your site for your front page. Everything goes into your front page until that one is refined to the best it can be. Then work on the other ones if you're going to catch up. But every time you create a post, do the best you can while creating that post. Avoid title duplication. Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. It happens because you use a default setting somewhere. You can have set up Yoast with a default setting for a title, and it's using a default title across multiple pages. It's like there's all kinds of reasons you'd have a default title and on your pages and posts. To find out what you've got, you can use a tool called Screaming Frog. Very nice tool. It's free. Oh, forgot to plug it in. Let's fix that before the battery dies. It's a free tool for the first 500 pages. You download it, you install it on your computer, and it will index the first 500 pages of your website. And it does a really fantastic job. When it goes through, it indexes everything, it lists up all your tags, all your titles, all your content. It gives you a very big, vivid picture of your site. If your site is not bigger than 500 pages, perfect tool. Give you everything you need. If it's bigger than 500 pages, This is an expensive program. It's 200 pounds a year. That's not dollars, that's pounds. Fortunately, it's not euros. But right now, you can get a deal. I mean, the British pound is down in the toilet, so. I'm about to buy it myself, and last year when I looked at it, I was looking at $270. Now I'm only looking at $230. $240, I think. That's how bad the British pound's doing. So, US.
Go
Anyway.
Brexit.
Yeah, well, whatever it takes to allow me to afford things in British pounds. I hate when companies price in British pounds or euros. Anyway, fantastic tool. I've been using it for quite some time. I use it for an initial investigation on a site when I first take over a client to see what they have. This brings me to a little bit about your H tags. Okay, your H tags throughout your site being your H1, H2, H3, H4, all the way down the line. When you create a post, your title of that post is automatically an H1 tag. You have no option on that. If your title is published in your post, it is an H1 tag. Google hates when you use more than one H1 tag on a post. They will actually penalize you, from what I'm told. I've not verified that, but I believe so.
Yeah, totally.
Because the H1 tag is kind of like the chapter of a book. You read a book, there's only one big title for the whole chapter. They don't give you a whole bunch of big titles all the way through the chapter. There might be subtitles throughout, and that's what you have to use. You have to use your H2, H3, H4, H5. If you need large subtitles, larger than your big title or whatever, CSS. You adjust the H2 tags for larger fonts. You know, adjust the H3 tags. Basically, one of the first things you do, or if you're rebuilding or whatever, you settle on a hierarchy of your H1 through H8 tags, and you settle on a font size hierarchy of all of them, and which ones they're going to have. And you use it and stick to it, and you get something built up very nicely. And using H2 tags and H3 tags, Google really loves, because when it's an H2 tag, they know this is sub information, it's important. H3, this is sub information, it's semi-important. But if you got H2 here and then a whole bunch of info, another H2, it's like, okay, these are two separate sections in the post. So it gives you a way to deal with the information. So always think about your every post you publish and create. Think of SEO, how you can do the SEO as you're going through it. And remember, above all else, everything you do, write for humans. This is something that saved my butt from years ago. Back years ago, in the beginning of the internet, when gaming Google was easy to do, piece of cake to game them, same way you can probably still game Alexa now. Everyone was talking about keyword stuffing and this stuffing, and I just didn't do it. I wrote my content for humans. And then when the algorithms caught up with it, all those people that were stuffing had to go back and redo all their content. I didn't have to redo any of my content. What happened was I watched my content go from here in the rankings to here. It just kept rising and rising because I'd already written my content for humans. And that's the biggest thing. You should always write it for a human. If you want to try to tweak it towards the search engines, tweak it that direction. But don't write it in that direction. That's it. That's all I got. Questions?
When you say tweak it towards being SEO, I'm guessing using the Yoast keyword tool is probably the best thing you can do for that, eh? Yeah, okay.
Use a keyword tool, or you look at it and go, well, this is about this. Can I legitimately use, in my case, well, my case is WordPress plugins. Can I legitimately use WordPress plugins in multiple places on this post?
Yeah.
Without it looking like keyword stuffing, without it being keyword stuffing. And yes, I can. There's lots of places I can do it. And it's perfectly natural. It flows into the language of what I'm writing. So basically, you look at it and go, what's this about? What's the main focus? Can I take that focus keyword or phrase and use it elsewhere in natural language, so it doesn't look like I'm keyword stuffing, and that it still makes sense to the people who are reading the post.
Should you pay for your Yoast, or should you get free plugin?
I don't see the value in it. I have clients that pay for the advanced tool because they spend more time. I mean, it does have value for the premium version. If you spend a lot of time on your SEO, there's additional tools. I don't, because I don't have that time yet. I may eventually, because I may find I want those additional tools for my site, but I won't do the work myself. I'll pay twice, because I'll pay for the plugin and I'll pay someone else to do the work for me. So.
One thing I want to bring up about the H1 tags, some shortcode generators and some things that list recent posts will sometimes fish in a bad way and build the content with H1s. So you have a whole list of recent pieces, and there'll be H1s and H2s in amongst them. And I've seen it happen a bunch of times, so you have to always pay attention whether or not your plugin does that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Without doing it right.
Any other questions?
How important is it to use the H1s, H2, H3 in order, so that, does it really matter?
Doesn't really matter.
Because I've often chosen based on size as a designer, but not necessarily.
Doesn't matter. I use them, the most important thing is not to use the H1 more than once.
Okay.
Because Google sees that H in the code when it reads the code. It knows whether you're an H1, H2, H3. But I use them in a mixed manner all through my sites. And one site, I was really dumb and I didn't have the right size, so I adjusted my H3, and now my H3 is bigger than my H2. So, yeah, the font size. Yeah, I know. Crazy brains, ADHD, oh, squirrel. Yes.
I think as long as you have your H1, it's the title.
It's title.
Have that one at the top.
Yeah.
Where the other ones go probably doesn't make any difference.
No.
But if they were going to do anything with that, having the location of your title at the top where you expect to see a title, I think would be a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I see these H's for the H1?
Oh, well, here I can show you real quick in the code.
I think if you're not using code, you're using the little drop down thing.
Oh, you can. Oh, if you want to see it, you want to see it when you're
Yeah.
composing. What you want to do is you can see it right here.
It says
It'll-
heading 1.
it'll
heading
vary.
2, I think.
Oh, okay, so this is when you're writing the post.
Yeah.
When you're writing the post, it'll vary.
Okay, I need to start writing some posts.
You can.
Yeah, it says it like that.
Okay.
It'll let you do H1 in the body, but it's probably already done it.
It's
through the
well,
theme.
the moment you create this title, it automatically, as soon as it publishes it, it gets wrapped in an H1. So you should not, when you're creating the body content, do not use H1 anywhere in the body content. Use anything but as they see the list, they show you what the font size is going to be based upon your theme.
So really, they shouldn't even have H1 available.
Well, they should.
Sure, they should.
Well,
Why, to wreck everybody else so you do better?
That's right.
that way, you know, when it's just another WordPress site, you can find all the H1s.
No, before Google got picky about it, you used to use H1 at the heading of everything where you use H2 now. I've got old content that is still using multiple H1s. You know, because that was the way you did it. You created a section, H1, title. H2 was subtitles in that. You create another section, H1, title. That's the way it used to be done.
Yeah.
And then Google changed the algorithm and changed the rules on us. Is basically how it worked. But it used to be the way it was done. And of course, how it's done now, in 6 months, Google may change their algorithms again, do something entirely different, because about the time everyone gets used to the way it's working, they change it all. Which is why SEO is such a big business. Because they're constantly changing the algorithms. And Bing is not too far behind them, except Bing doesn't hold 80% of the search market. I think it's 80% that Google holds now.
It's big, yeah.
It's like massive, which is why everyone kowtows to them. You know, I prefer not to talk to them at all. You were talking about statistics before. AW stats is what I tell people. If you've got a good hosting provider using cPanel, you've got AW stats available in your cPanel. You will get the 100% true accurate stats of how much your site is being visited by looking at your AW stats. And if you take those stats and you go look at your comparisons of Google stats, you will find that Google is only picking up 40 to 60% of what your true stats are. So what you see in Google is only 40%, 40 to 60% of your true stats. And I've compared that website after website after website on my servers. They miss out on so much, and partly because Google depends on JavaScript to pick up all the information for when you're using analytics. If that JavaScript doesn't trigger, for whatever reason, there was a bounce when the website loaded, they're blocking JavaScripts on their computer, there's a slow internet connection, any number of reasons can be why that JavaScript doesn't ping, that information isn't picked up by Google. So you don't get all the true, but if you want true information, go into the control panel and look at AW stats.
I've seen some weird devices that are funky with JavaScript too.
Yeah.
I think gaming consoles,
Yeah.
some of them, they automatically just skip it.
Yeah, and
So
well, the thing is like if they run into a JavaScript that's not loading, they just continue loading the page and throw the thing out.
Yeah.
So they,
And two, if JavaScript happens lower on the page than an error, somebody else's bad code
Yeah.
wrecks Google's and doesn't register as a hit at all.
No.
and that's a whole problem.
Yeah.
There's lots of reasons why you don't get all the stats, but we still have to go to Google because their search engine, when it was built, I mean, I was on the internet the day it was launched. Me and all my buddies that were massive geeks at the time, like, oh my God, somebody launched a search engine where we put in a word and we actually find what we're looking for. 'Cause that was the problem with search engines in the late 90s.
Ironically, I found out Google from looking at my server logs and going, what's this Google bot? And then tracing back saying, oh, this Google bot is coming from this thing called Google.
Yeah, and then I was there to help them grow. Now I just want to smack them down because they become too big. But that's the way it's worked. But yeah, they were great. Once upon a time, they were great. Even now, the only reason I still use them for searching now is technical stuff. I want something else, I go to Bing or I go to DuckDuckGo. I get actual results. Google, the results are unfortunately skewed unless it's technical information. For some reason, they still do good technical information. I compare DuckDuckGo and Bing on a regular basis to make sure I'm still getting the best results for my stuff.
When you say technical information, you're like looking up code or
Looking up code
hardware,
tips, how something was done. I'm having this particular problem with my site, or I'm trying to figure out how to do this, and I'm looking up code. Well, Google still has the best delivery for that kind of problem. So, all right. Well, if there's no other questions, I thank you all for coming. Hopefully, you guys got something out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure we will get more people next time.
There's probably people still driving around trying to find the place.
Oh, it's been obscure.
If you hadn't been standing outside smoking,
No, I was standing outside because I was waiting for them to open the door. I don't smoke. I vape.
okay.